dusty road when he saw a musician sitting under a tree, playing his instrument. And the warrior laughed and he said, "What's the point of that? The world is on fire. People need warriors, not musicians. People need protection, not songs. My sword keeps people alive. What does your little instrument do?" The musician looked up and he said, "You're right. Your sword protects. It keeps people alive, but my music gives people something to live for. Walk with me to the next village and I'll show you." The warrior shrugged and he agreed. They reached a village where the people were tired and beaten down. And the warrior stood at the gates, ready to defend the village from any danger, but the villagers barely noticed him. They moved slowly, their heads down, their eyes heavy. The musician sat in the town square and started to play. People stopped what they were doing and began to gather around him as they listened. Some smiled, some cried. The kids were laughing and dancing. The warrior watched as the whole mood of the village changed. It was like a weight had been lifted, like the clouds had parted. A man came up to the warrior and he said, "Your strength keeps us safe, and we're grateful. But his music reminds us why life is worth living. Without that, what's the point?" The warrior looked at the musician and said, "I didn't realize how much people needed this." The musician smiled and said, "Strength protects the body, and inspiration feeds the soul. We need both." Good morning. I think that's an important little story. I was talking to my mother-in-law a few weeks ago, and we were talking about some stuff that I've been working on, and I mentioned to her that I found myself doing a lot of exploring of my own spirituality, and that I was thinking about and studying spirituality, and she says to me, sort of unexpectedly, she goes, "What is that? What does that mean?" Now, my mother-in-law's first language is Farsi, and sometimes I think our conversations, some things may get lost in translation, and I'm not sure if this was one of those cases, but her question was very pointed, and it was a good question, and it got me thinking. What does it mean to explore one's spirituality? What the hell does what does that mean? Exploring spirituality has come up for me a lot in the last several months, partially because I've been seeing a new therapist, and something that keeps coming up has been this idea of what I've been calling spiritual abuse. And it's something that I wrote about in my book, Break and Untangle. So I suppose I've been thinking about this for a long time. That book came out in 21. But I'm a bit fascinated with this idea of spiritual abuse, so much so that I think it's going to be the focus of my dissertation for a PhD program I'm planning to start in the fall. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think a lot of people experience it, and I think there's a collective need to unpack it, and I don't think that we're talking enough about it. The brand of religion that I grew up in didn't look very kindly on people like me. It was a religion of exclusion, not inclusion. And their rules and beliefs told me that I was separate from these spiritual blessings that were reserved for people who fit a certain mold or a certain lifestyle. And as soon as I got some autonomy and agency in my life and moved away from that, I rejected religion and the idea of it all whole cloth. I wanted nothing to do with any of it. And because religion has claimed spirituality as its stock in trade, that had to go for me as well. No spirituality for me either. And as I wrote in my book, rejecting human spirituality is a lot like rejecting a limb. It's like cutting off your own arm. Our spirituality is a part of who we are. It needs to be fed, it has to be nurtured, and it has to be developed. It's the other half of the human experience, an experience that can't be whole without that half. No religion, no version of what people call God has a monopoly on the human spirit. But because spirit can't be seen, only experienced, it's easy to claim it and package it and brand it. It's hard to argue the validity and authenticity of something that you can't see or measure, that's only experienced. Now, my own path has taken me to study other ways of thinking about spirituality, including those that make no claim of religious affiliation. Lots of reading on this. But what I've noticed with the more I read is the more New Age approaches to spirituality, it's that I found myself learning a new language for how to talk about spirituality. which honestly it hasn't brought me any comfort. In fact, it bothered me a lot, because what is religion if not a language for talking about spirituality? And so in reading the more contemporary ideas of spirituality, I found myself some ways indoctrinating myself into a new religion. And that there seems to be this continuum where you break from traditional religions, you start exploring what you hope is more purity of spirituality. And as you begin to try to understand and analyze and intellectualize, there seems to be this way that it loops back into dogma and rule and truths. And we again find ourselves confined by the very things we were trying to escape. We've stumbled upon the paradox of spiritual exploration, which was exactly what I wasn't looking for. So where does that leave us? If you're trying to explore spirituality and understand more about your spirituality and you're hitting roadblocks, where does that leave you? Why is it that an attempt to understand our spirit corrupts it? And maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is just how I'm experiencing it. I don't know. But some part of me thinks that the idea of landing on any kind of certainty about it is exactly what I'm supposed to avoid. Part of me suspects that what's to be avoided is experiencing the information about the human experience and inspiration we derive from it in the same way. These are two separate things. The information, and think about that word, information, inform, the physical form, physical experience, in which, by the way, I would include the ego. It will not be experienced like that which comes to us through inspiration. Think about that word, inspiration, in spirit. And as a consequence, matters of spirit can't be expressed or articulated in a way that the physical or the ego or the intellect can interpret it. You cannot possibly experience the warrior's sword in the same way that you experience the musician's song. And to try to even do so would be a perversion of both. We need both. Both matter. Both serve important purposes, but you can't compare them. You can't make sense of them in the same way. I know that for people like me, people for whom religion has not historically been kind, who have experienced what I'm calling spiritual abuse, there is a certain allure to rejecting all things spiritual and all things spiritual adjacent. Maybe that's you, I don't know, but if it is, I get it. I really do. I get it. But what I'd like to do is invite you to begin to explore how you can experience your own spirituality. A spiritual experience absent all the nonsense that so often goes along with it. Experience the spirit of connection, of belonging, of a faith, not a faith in an admonishing deity, but a faith in the wholeness of your human experience. Because the music was meant for you too. The music is written and performed for you too. So sing and dance and laugh and love. Allow yourself to be moved by the beauty of the sunrise, to relish in that feeling that you get when hugging your lover, to experience the freedom of being who you are in your own skin, because that's not sin. That experience should not be marred with guilt or shame. Those parts of this human experience, they belong to you too. That experience is the very essence of who you are and who you were always meant to be. May you have joy, peace, and happiness, good health and well-being, a life of ease and prosperity, the courage to get what you want from this life, the clarity to know what that is, the imagination to not sell yourself short, and the discipline to see it through. Have a good day, everybody.